welcome you to tonight's Forest Protection Forum. It's being put on by the Stop Clearcutting California campaign, which is part of Sierra Club. It's a Sierra Club's grassroots network campaign. And we try to educate the public and Sierra Club members on forestry methods and especially on clearcutting. And tonight we are having Gary Hughes talked to us about biomass, and Jennifer is.
Into the GPO.
So I'm going to mute everybody right now, and then I'll unmute Gary.
Probably the first 45 minutes.
All the plants.
So I just unmuted Gary, and I'm going to unmute Jennifer. Let's see.
And I just unmuted myself, Karen.
Okay, you did. Okay, great.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So we are.
So just let me just say one thing. So we're going to ask. Gary's going to talk for a half an hour. If you have any questions, you should put it in chat, and then Jennifer will ask them after about a half an hour. And so Jennifer's going to introduce Gary Hughes now.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you all for joining us, and we are so pleased to welcome Gary Hughes to our forum today. Gary is currently the America's Program Coordinator for Biofuelwatch, and for those who may be unfamiliar with Biofuelwatch, it is a nonprofit organization that provides information and undertakes advocacy and campaigning in relation to climate, biodiversity, land, human rights, and public health impacts of large-scale industrial bioenergy. Gary's been with Biofuelwatch for the past 5 years, working on a portfolio of projects in California and internationally. His undergrad studies were at the University of Oregon, after which he completed his master's in environmental studies at the University of Montana. That was back in 2002. And since then, he's worked with several environmental organizations, including the NRDC and EPIC, the Environmental Protection Information Center. He will continue the conversation we have started on the very important topic of biofuel from wood pellets and explore the environmental and social justice implications of the pivot to bioenergy in the California forest products industry. So thank you so much, Gary, for joining us today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, Karen, and thank you to everyone who has joined us this afternoon and evening. It's going to get dark kind of quick, so I'm hoping the light looks well for my brief presentation. Again, my name is Gary Hughes, and I work as the America's Program Coordinator with the organization Biofuelwatch, and I've put together a brief presentation about the Golden State Natural Resources Wood Pellet Export Scheme. For Biofuelwatch and other partners, we think this is a really important project that people in California and globally should be paying really close attention to. So first, a little bit about Biofuelwatch. We are a global climate justice organization, international in scope. We're very, very small. As Jennifer had suggested, we really focus on the impacts of large-scale industrial bioenergy, but central to our way of organizing is promoting citizen engagement. And in this sense, what I'm really trying to do with this presentation is paint a broad picture of the Golden State Natural Resources Scheme, and really to describe a fair amount of the politics, as well as, lightly touching upon the risks and threats, with the understanding that everyone who's made it to this meeting today has a great deal of experience. And so I think people will be able to take the information and apply it to potential lines of action. And that's how we're hoping to really wrap up the presentation. So I've got about 25 minutes to 30 minutes of material that I'll share. And then we'll get into a discussion about what to do. I do want to notice before I go on from this, though, that we're under the fiscal sponsorship of Global Justice Ecology Project. And I've been working with folks from what we call GJEP for several decades. So Biofuelwatch, you can check out our website. I really encourage people to take a look at our work. As an example, then, just to point out that we've been working a lot on climate and energy issues here in California, and a couple of years ago released this report. It's no longer a new report, where we really tried to address the markets and technology focus in California when it comes to responding to climate. And then that has led us to have a really high level degree of attention on questions around bioenergy. Been watching the conversion of refineries in the San Francisco Bay Area to manufacturing liquid biofuels, but then looking really closely at what's going on with woody biomass in the state. Just to make sure, though, that everyone is really on the same page, we'll start because we're talking about a wood pellet export scheme. We're talking about the manufacture of densified wood pellet. Dense wood pellet requires round wood. It requires more than just scraps and waste, as the industry will refer to it. And it's a very intensive industrial process. But just so folks understand then that we're really, going to be talking about the forest product industry in California pivoting to make these wood pellets as a primary, focus of industrial development. Why is this happening? We're looking at a characterization of woody biomass energy as renewable. That's true here in California, nationally, and also in many instances globally, including in Europe. There's a very strong trend of political convenience that's leading decision makers to take refuge in converting fossil fuel infrastructure to bioenergy infrastructure. We're seeing a global trend of the conversion of coal power plants to biomass burning. And that's resulting in the degradation of native forests for generating electricity. And then especially in the global south, we're seeing the expansion of a plantation forestry model. But just to really make sure that, again, we're all operating with the same vocabulary, that basically biomass power emits more carbon dioxide than burning either coal or gas. And this is pretty much proven. And this is why we contend very strongly that there's nothing renewable about biomass energy. So what is Golden State Natural Resources? I kind of painted a bigger picture, maybe a global picture of what's going on with woody biomass. But right here in California, then we've seen the emergence of this really unprecedented large-scale project proposal. We know that biomass is real in California. There's a lot of different different ways it can manifest, but this question of manufacturing wood pellets for export, we find to be really on the extreme of the spectrum. So GSNR, for short, for Golden State Natural Resources, we say GSNR, they proposed to site and construct 2 new wood pellet manufacturing facilities, one in Tuolumne County and the other in Lassen County. It would draw feedstock from more than a 100-mile radius around each facility, drawing from public or private lands, and their goal is to manufacture 1 million tons of wood pellets a year. I'm having there it is. So the Lassen facility is actually proposed to be one of the largest in the nation, 700,000 tons a year, in the Tuolumne facility at just 300,000 tons a year. The wood pellets would be shipped by rail and truck to the port of Stockton, and then they be shipped overseas to Asia, Korea, Japan, to the UK, and even to other European destinations, Latin America as well as on the chart. And so the idea, though, again, this trend of converting coal plants to burning biomass is one of the major drivers of this proposal. In GSNR's own words, they proposed to build these 2 facilities. And then early on, they were actually looking at exporting through Richmond, but there was a degree of community resistance in Richmond, and kind of shut the door to GSNR there. And now they're focused explicitly on Stockton. I took this photo of the site in Tuolumne County outside of Jamestown. It's an old Louisiana Pacific mill site. This is where the Tuolumne facility is proposed to be built. This is right now it's a very, very quiet place. Once upon a time, it was host to industrial wood product activity. So who or what is Golden State Natural Resources? Again, one of my objectives with this presentation is to give everyone just a solid vocabulary in the civics of what the Golden State Natural Resources Project is. So, you need to understand where it came from. The Rural County Representatives of California is an organization of 40, as I say, rural counties. They've come together to advocate on different fronts. One of the things then that the RCRC did was form Golden State Natural Resources, but its sister affiliated entity is the Golden State Finance Authority, which is a joint power authority that essentially in the beginning was formed to be able to carry forth with multi-jurisdictional housing projects. But as it turns out now, Golden State Finance Authority has taken a major role in Golden State Natural Resources, and they're also acting as the lead agency on the CEQA review of the Golden State Natural Resources Project. There's 5 counties that are represented on the board of directors of Golden State Natural Resources. That's Modoc County, Inyo County, Butte County, Humboldt County. Notoriously enough, since Humboldt County is in many ways out of the project proposal's geography, but Siskiyou County is there as well. And then really importantly for this group of people, there's dozens of people here with a lot of experience in forest politics here in California. Again, the civics, I really want to make sure that people understand how well connected RCRC is. And here we can see this is the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force, kind of convened basically under the executive. It is a reincarnation of a body of multi-jurisdictional work that's been happening ever since Jerry Brown was governor, and it's carried forth under Governor Newsom. And here we see that RCRC, Doug Teeter, who is Butte County Supervisor, who is on the board of directors of Golden State Natural Resources, is therefore at the highest level in this executive committee of the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force, which means he's hobnobbing directly with Wade Crowfoot and others, as including from the United States Forest Service. So Golden State Natural Resources hasn't received a lot of really overt public support from some of the major decision makers in the state, but the evidence is really strong that behind the scenes, they've got a lot of support, and they've been able to move things forward quite a bit because of these connections. And so then what are folks thinking at this high level of what California should do when we're looking at questions of forest management, community development, and, basically protecting communities and landscapes from, the impacts of human economic activity? Well, what they've decided to do is to bring the wood pellet sector to California. And here we have one of the examples of Enviva's wood pellet processing facilities. This is in North Carolina. So I'm definitely, my slides are not moving always in the direction that I'd like. Here we go. So I'm not spending a lot of time on the impacts really of the wood pellet sector, but I want to make sure that we talk about these matters because they've been proven to be really serious issues where the wood pellet sector has already been established, for instance, in the southeastern United States. And these are very real risks and threats to the development of this sector in California. So we're looking at very serious public health issues that arise from the manufacture of the wood pellets. We're looking at really serious public safety issues that arise from the transport, storage, and export logistics that accompany a wood pellet sector. One of the big examples that we always try to bring to people's attention is the risk of fires with the storage of wood pellets. Despite the rhetoric about burning biomass as being a climate solution, the truth is that wood pellets are highly carbon intensive. They're also extremely inefficient and that, as I said earlier, burning wood to generate electricity produces more carbon emissions at the smokestack than coal. And then in California, in the context of this project, there's a lot of talk about forest resilience. There's a lot of talk about forest health, but I've also seen firsthand that the proponents of this project really kind of bounce back and forth between using the approved narrative about how important this project is to, make our forests more resilient, where other representatives in different contexts will simply talk about this imperative of clearing the forest to prevent wildfire, a kind of Trumpian, rake the forest approach to log our forest into submission to prevent wildfire. But what we know is these projects, once they were to be up and going to meet the demand of manufacturing 1 million tons of wood pellets a year, that the feedstock requirements would remove trees of any type and size. They would take everything that they could get. And we know that this would damage habitat and would have very severe climate impacts. So really quickly, though, I do want to talk about the economic issues as well as they're arising here, in that there's a lot of talk about jobs and how these projects are going to bring jobs to our communities. But what we know, and this is not just activist talk right here, this is all information that I've sourced from UC Berkeley and California Department of Workforce Development Research. And essentially, natural working lands is the language that the state of California is using for a lot of the vegetation management and woody biomass utilization projects that they're promoting. But we also know that these jobs are very dangerous and they're very low paying, with a lot of issues about job quality and social marginalization. And the other thing that's really become true in the wood product sector in California and throughout the Western states over the last couple of decades is the demographic change in those who are working in the woods. And increasingly, there's a lot of immigrants who are doing this work, and they find themselves in a whole variety of vulnerable employment circumstances, especially because of the private contractors and the way the private contractors work, with a lot of movement from one job site to another. Workers find themselves in really exposed situations where they don't have a lot of resort to any sort of protections. And so over time, as we've seen with the forest product sector here in California, that there's been a lot of issues of employer mistreatment of forest workers. So I just feel like this is really important to flag, because there's a lot of emphasis on the utilization of woody biomass in California climate policy, and the Golden State Natural Resources Project clearly falls under that. But the research of the state shows that, if you don't think about this and you just throw a lot of money at the natural working lands and the biomass sector, that it's a low road to economic development. We also know that it can be a low road to ecosystem stewardship. And these are pictures, the two on the left from the Dixie Fire, post-fire salvage logging, and these on the right are from the Slater Fire in the Klamath. And so we know that there's a lot of environmental impacts from this really aggressive approach to wildfire prevention, as the many interests like to call it. And you can see those impacts when you get up into the air. So I'm trying to move along here pretty quickly. I'm definitely really interested in the discussion. I think I can get through here in just about 5 more minutes. Just to talk about the project, where it's at right now. I first learned about Golden State Natural Resources in August 2022, and by late November that year, they had initiated scoping the first time. We had really good response on that first scoping for the CEQA review. And then in early 2023, there was a bit of organizing in Richmond, because Golden State Natural Resources didn't do scoping in Richmond, nor in Stockton for that matter. But that was taken, as an indication in Richmond that Golden State Natural Resources wasn't a good party to do business with. And the 11 terminal operators decided to say no. I think GSNR knew that they'd done a really poor job with CEQA getting started, so they reissued their scoping in June 2023, starting again from the start, really explicit focus on port operations through Stockton, but they still failed to do any outreach in Stockton. Now, where we are at is we're awaiting the release of the draft environmental impact report in early 2024. They say Q1 is what Golden State Natural Resources is saying. We think the release of the draft EIR will be a great opportunity for us to organize. This is a very ephemeral project. We're trying to stop it before the concrete is poured, but it's also therefore still really difficult to have something firm to oppose. And we think the release of the draft EIR will give us something really strong to organize around. GSNR itself is in really severe financial straits. They're relying almost entirely on RCRC for contracted services. So we think it's really evident because of the difficulties with financing that any delays will be detrimental to the project. So in that sense, people are continuing to organize, and this is where I really want to celebrate the work that was done in Stockton by a whole bunch of really motivated individuals and organizations to get ahead of the game, to kind of cut GSNR off at the pass, as it were, in their efforts to secure agreements with the Port of Stockton for some of the port operations development. So we're not just waiting around for the draft EIR to be released, and trying to continue to, gum up the works for Golden State Natural Resources. Globally, on an international level, we're also trying to do some work around the finances of GSNR. And this is one of my last kind of text-heavy slides and all, but to talk about the finances. So essentially, it is a little bit strange because GSFA, Golden State Finance Authority, is the lead agency with authority over the CEQA review of Golden State Natural Resources. But GSNR received an initial $10 million of seed money from GSFA, and then they've also received another $1.5 million in a second loan. So it's almost $12 million in total from the agencies that overseen their environmental review. GSNR last year also received a $500,000 grant from the Forest Service. One thing that keeps everything kind of going here is that there are promises of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for feedstock off of a lot of public lands projects because of money that's earmarked in the Inflation Reduction Act. If that comes to fruition or not remains to be seen, but it is there, and that's an economic driver for this. So then we've been developing some finance campaign activities around Barclays. Golden State Natural Resources had previously retained Barclays and specifically mentioned Barclays Bank as their investment banker, but because GSNR is so broke right now, they can't afford to continue to retain Barclays. So we're going to find a way to pressure Barclays right now to really sever the relationship with Golden State Natural Resources. But we want to flag that the Barclays connection raises the specter of Drax, because Drax has a very tight relationship with Barclays Bank, and Drax is the biomass monster in the UK, and they have a pretty sophisticated integrated biomass supply chain. So we do watch Golden State Natural Resources, and we've heard them say that they'd like to sell their entitlements. They'd like to get CEQA done and sell the project. And we wonder if entities like Drax aren't out there looming. So civil society, though, is coming together by we can see by the number of people who are here this evening, the interest I've seen from many Sierra Club activists in many different quarters in California. The interest that we've had from partners in Japan and Korea and Australia, in Europe, concerns about Golden State Natural Resources bringing 1 million tons more of wood pellets on a yearly basis to the market. People are organizing to challenge this concept of converting coal plants to biomass as a climate solution. And we're all a part of that now. Biofuelwatch is a member of the Environmental Paper Network. We're also a member of the Global Forest Coalition. And we've been really excited to work in coalition with a lot of excellent organizations who have leaned really strongly into fighting the Golden State Natural Resources proposal. I think on that one slide that I shared with all of the groups, for instance, that had signed on to the letter that was initiated by activists in Stockton to the commissioners of the Port of Stockton, that we have a really good collection of groups working on this issue. And last June, it was more than 100 groups that weighed in opposing Golden State Natural Resources. So I want to say thank you to everyone from the Sierra Club that made this possible. Little bit of my contact information here, and just to flag some of the websites where you can find some more information about the work that we're doing. Biofuelwatch.org.uk is the Biofuelwatch website. So again, thank you everyone for joining us for this presentation. And I'm really excited to hear the brainstorming and what the ideas that people have about how they might be able to add unique value-added political organizing to stop this nefarious wood pellet export project.
Thank you so much. Ugh, my video doesn't seem to want to. Oh, there we go. Hello. So thank you so much, Gary. That was fabulous talk with lots of really good detailed information about the shenanigans of GSNR. So we have a few questions for you. And presumably more, it looks like some are coming in as I speak. Kristen Mercer asks, biofuel and biomass are industry greenwashing terms. Have you considered adopting more accurate terminology instead of endorsing these fallacious greenwash items?
I don't know necessarily how, for instance, Biofuelwatch would change their name right now, but I can see lots of reasons for doing so. I can understand the semantic questions, but I don't have a good answer for that question right now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Food for thought, though, I guess. So where in California or other states are they measuring the dioxin benzene emissions, and where can we find that information?
Well, off the top of my head, to answer that question, one of the best sources for information on the air pollution threats from wood pellet manufacture is the Environmental Information Agency. That's a really good question too. And I am trying to remember the name of the group from Texas that has worked so hard on this stuff. But the other group that comes together that's been a great partner on addressing the air pollution issues associated with wood pellet manufacture is the Southern Environmental Law Center. And I just put that name in the chat, selc.org. And if you go and check out their website, you'll find a fair amount of excellent resources and some case studies in terms of what kind of air pollution issues are being encountered at different wood pellet manufacturing facilities. And I'm trying to find that other resource really quick. And well, maybe we can move on to another question, and I'll try to answer that. Again, I want to say I'm really glad to answer some questions, but I'm really interested in this community of people that comes together on a monthly basis to talk about forest protection, to share some ideas within your community about what can be done on this issue, because I think it's helpful for folks to learn from someone like me, to share some ideas about what is the matter at hand. But I know that there's a lot of organizing experience in this community, and I really want people to feel that they can decide and figure out what needs to be done, and that that line of action is not necessarily what needs to come from an activist like myself.
To your point, one of our questionnaires asks, what is your strategy? What are your steps for stopping the project?
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do is even though it's a totally different situation, is kind of replicate a little bit of what happened organically in Richmond in terms of the community creating enough concern that the operators of the Levin terminal were just kind of like, nope, we don't really need another major battle on our hands, especially since Richmond had such an effective no coal in Richmond campaign and was basically able to get the Levin terminal operators to commit to no longer exporting coal at a not so far future date that'll be wrapping up, but the community members wanted to make sure that Richmond didn't see, exporting wood pellets as an easy substitute. So that was pretty successful. We definitely, reduced some of Golden State Natural Resources wiggle room. So, following the lead of some really experienced people in Stockton, including Sierra Club, activists, as well as environmental justice stakeholders, we're thinking that we can, put a wrench in the works, as it were, for Golden State Natural Resources around trying to slow down their ability to establish any facilities in Stockton for export. And then we're engaging, and we're hoping people will continue to engage, because it was more than 100 organizations that joined in expressing opposition during the second round of scoping on the California Environmental Quality Act review. So again, I flagged that in Q1, the draft environmental impact report will be released, and we're really hoping that people are ready to lean in strongly on that process and create a firestorm of opposition. So we think the California Environmental Quality Act environmental review process is going to be a great opportunity for organizing.
And Karen, maybe you want to say a few words. I'll just say that, on Stop Clearcutting, who hosts this forum, Stop Clearcutting is mainly an educational campaign. We aren't allowed to directly lobby legislators. So you were trying to use the tool of education just to make people more aware of this topic, with letters to the editors, op-eds, presenting forums like this. We just are hoping that we can increase the number of voices that oppose this, because we don't have a lot of money, right? So we have to use the power of our voices because we don't have the power of money.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I understand what it means to be under-resourced, and I guess we did use that.
It should be that
I'm sorry, there was that one example of a situation where so many Sierra Club activists responded with letters to the editor to this one really kind of misleading op-ed that had been published in the Sacramento Bee promoting Golden State Natural Resources. So I concur. I think that kind of education effort is really important activism, and I think the more that people learn about this project, the more opposition we'll have. Now, I did want to.
Karen, Ash.
Would somebody please mute themselves?
I think you're unmuted, Karen, and I see your hand is raised, so I'll get to you. But yes, please mute yourself until I call on you. Thank you.
And let me just one last thing. It's been a great discussion. I'm definitely in the hot seat, and I love it that people are coming with so many good questions. But I noticed Jenny Blaker's question right here, and just brought up about questioning why we're only focused on big biomass in this instance. Big biomass. Well, we're definitely trying to do some triage, as it were. But I do want to flag that, Jenny, you mentioned liquid biofuels in your message right there. And the other issue that I'm working on here in California very strongly, and that Biofuelwatch works on an international level, are the question of liquid biofuels. And in particular, there's 2 refineries in the San Francisco Bay Area that are currently converting to manufacture liquid biofuels. And we are in a very deep battle to correct course, as it were. For instance, right now, Phillips 66 is pursuing low carbon fuel standard credits for making a liquid biofuel imported from high deforestation risk soy oil from Argentina. So I guess I don't want to distract us a lot from the focus on Golden State Natural Resources, but to provide Jenny some assurances that we are working on a number of different issues. And if we're not working on everything, it's because, as everyone is, we're just really stretched to the max.
And just to clarify for everybody, I'll just read Jenny's comment prior to asking her question. So thank you for the excellent and very clear presentation about the horrors of biomass energy industry and GSNR in particular. I realize that GNSR is a major study. You have limited resources to oppose it, but why the emphasis only on big biomass? It seems that smaller scale initiatives being supported at local levels will also have the same kind of negative impacts as well on habitat, climate, etc. I'm thinking also of biomass energy being used for making electricity in California and liquid biofuels for aviation. So just to give some context to that, to Gary's response on that. So I'm going to go ahead, Karen, why don't you unmute yourself and we'll have you ask your question, and then I'll go back to the chat for some of the other questions. Does that sound okay, Gary?
To choose next.
Yeah, I was just commenting in the chat that a proposal has been made for a biofuel factory in Washington State, where they're just at the permitting phase. Something that I have not personally done in the past, but has been very effective, and that's to directly approach the people that are on that. You showed that big line of the people that are on this commission, to go to the meetings, to make presentation, ask for time for presentation, and just have people testify, and then approach those people in public, in the press, and ask them, what do they think about the pollution from these issues that they're considering. What is their thought about that? How will this? Because all of these fuels, most of them, or the vast majority of them, they're made for export. They go to other countries. They're not helping the U.S. energy system. They're just for somebody to make profit. And sometimes they're foreign companies that are funding them. So we're making profit for foreign people for an energy source that's going to a foreign nation. And we're stuck with the pollution and the watershed problems and the lack of protection of our forests and timber. So you have to ask those really hard questions, and that doesn't have anything to do with your organization, especially if you can work with local newspaper or a journalist that wants to do a story on this kind of stuff. When you're bird dogging the people that are making this decision, you put them on the spot, and you ask them in front of the press what they think of this. I am telling you, they change their minds really fast when this happens. And the other question, maybe Gary, in this list of people on this committee, who's the friend of the forest there? Who can we really either approach because it's their state job to protect the forest for real, not just talking about it, or are there city council people who? So maybe you can share that kind of thing with the group to get that information to this community so we can approach these people individually, not necessarily as a group to lobby them, but to, you know, converse with them about this. So make it personal for the people who are deciding, and make it public what they say about it. Those two things. And the other thing was, there's a meeting, if you're interested in the Washington state issue, tomorrow, and I put the link to the Zoom link to the meeting, and
Karen,
the
I think you already
password
put
if
that
you need it.
information in the chat. So check
Yeah.
the chat for that information. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
a lot there, Gary. Did you
Yeah, no, there's a lot of really thoughtful comments that you shared, Karen. Thank you so much. I think it's always, important to think about tactics and be ready to adapt, to try new things, and to not just do things because that's the way we've always done them. So thank you for that kind of push to try new things. Now, when it comes to the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force, that executive committee that I pointed out, we have, for instance, been trying for some time now to secure a meeting with Yana Garcia, who's the secretary of Cal EPA. We don't know that Yana has the experience to be a friend of the forest, but she has the experience to be a defender of environmental justice communities. And so we do want to secure a meeting with her so that she understands the implications for Stockton. Stockton is basically still being very strongly marginalized in the decision-making process here. With that, I think a really ripe target in that executive committee that everyone here should feel comfortable perhaps in writing to and saying that the Golden State Natural Resources Project isn't the solution that it's being sold as, is Secretary Wade Crowfoot of the California Natural Resources Agency. So I really encourage people to contact Secretary Crowfoot. We know that Golden State Natural Resources has had meetings with Secretary Crowfoot, people should be holding the secretary accountable to be, just as Karen was saying, a real friend of the forest. So I think those are a couple items to share. Karen, you had some really good comments about tactics, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary, for that. Can you expand on the degree to which forest extraction jobs are super equipment heavy?
Well, I mean, this is something that really merits a bunch of study, but we know that the off-road machinery and all of the heavy trucking machinery is totally diesel dependent. So it's been some time now that I've been really actually trying to get more information about the actual amounts of liquid fuel and the emissions associated with that, because our hypothesis from looking at available numbers, for instance, in the California Air Resources Board emissions inventory, is that if those emissions are being accounted for, they're not being attributed to the timber industry itself. So that it's just been another way that the timber industry has been getting a free pass on their climate impact. So there's no question that it's a really fuel intensive practice when any kind of forest management is happening nowadays. It's just a lot of diesel fuel that's required. So that's a good question. It's a good research question that could use some attention.
Okay, and from one of our other listeners, is there any connection to the development of cogeneration plants? And for those who don't know what cogeneration means, I had to Google it. Is the generation of electricity and other energy jointly, especially the utilization of the steam left over from electricity generation to produce heat?
Yeah, cogeneration is not uncommon in California. There are, a lot of smaller biomass plants around the state. Some of them are really directly associated with existing wood product manufacturing facilities. One that comes to mind, for instance, is the Scotia biomass plant at the Humboldt Redwood Company ex-Palco sawmill there. So again, we've done a little bit of triage and have been really actually very intent, like really tried to focus the discussion about Golden State natural resources, because once you start to unpeel the smelly onion of biomass in California, you can find a lot of really worrisome projects out there. We just found that the scale of the Golden State Natural Resources proposal elevated itself to that we've tried to message and just focus specifically on it. But the context that Golden State Natural Resources is happening within is facilitating a lot of worrisome pivots towards the utilization of woody biomass in California. And I can recite a lot of those projects for folks right now, but I know that people are finding within their communities different expressions of this trend that are causing them some concern. So again, I think people's excellent experience organizing and doing some public education is going to be really important in all of those instances. And then more broadly, I think we are engaged in something of a narrative battle with certain economic forces that have had a lot of success in kind of creating some hysteria around wildfire. And I think that's a challenge for us to counter that narrative and find a way to push back. I just realized I was totally sitting in the dark in here with everyone. Excuse me for that.
We thought you were trying to save electricity. So Maya, can I ask you to unmute yourself so you can maybe clarify for everybody else your question about your comment and question. I'm very surprised to see Don Hankins' name on the GSNR list. Has anybody been able to talk to him? So for those of us who don't know who Don Hankins is.
My understanding is Don Hankins used to work at Chico State. I don't know if he still does, but he's very much a prescribed burn person in the Native American community, quite respected. But unfortunately, it seems to me like he seems to be going in the way of very much the industrial narrative. So I was a little surprised to see him like right up there among all those names. I was just wondering if anyone had a chance to talk to him, because it does seem like some of this is really about the basics of talking to people, like what this forum does is the basics of education. Not that we're trying to educate people who are so much in the know and very well respected, but maybe they could get education just from an exchange. That's where I was trying to.
Yeah, no, he would definitely be a person to reach out to. Now, of course, this executive committee that I pointed out right there, that's, we know we're concerned about the really high level push for the utilization of woody biomass that's coming from, the state of California. And this Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force is the reincarnation of a trend, that I said that Jerry Brown started. So I definitely concur with you, Maya, that it could be a little bit worrisome to see Don's name there. I don't know Don, but I know some of his work. I concur with you that talking people is the best route forward, with the caveat as well that, there are some good things happening within this, the hysteria around wildfire. I don't know if people are going to understand, if I'm going to express myself very well. Now, it's not a panacea, but we know that getting more fire on the landscape is really crucial. We've known for a long time that we needed to return that type of disturbance regime to the landscape, and that fire suppression hasn't helped. So there are some good, elements around all of the work that's happening at the state level with wildfire and forest resilience. But we've also seen, though, that there's a tendency to kind of fall back to the same old heavy-handed approach to extracting a lot of material, to removing the biome. I've now heard people start talking about the decarbonization of our forests. I'm like, isn't that what logging the old growth was? That was decarbonization, man. So it's a complicated situation, and the most important thing I get from what you're saying, Maya, is we do need to keep talking to people. And so I haven't spoken to Dawn, but that would be a great conversation to have. And everyone here has that capacity. Please.
Yeah, I mean, one of the folks that I was able to speak to in the Maidu tribe, in the Maidu community, and then I've heard about some UROC leaders as well, saying that, they're just, in the name of prescribed fire and forest restoration, way too much is taken, and then they say stop, stop, stop. But it's not always that they're heard in the right way. So I don't think that necessarily forest extraction on this large scale pre-prescribed fire was ever done in a traditional way. I don't know, but for sure, I mean, we know that the fire itself was good. It's what they do to prepare for the fire, which includes most often massive, massive amounts of logging.
So I'd like to say a statement here. So this group of people that are in this forum right now are there. Some of them are with the Stop Clearcutting campaign. Most are not. Many are from other parts of the Sierra Club. Many are from other organizations. Totally, it's kind of an open forum for forest activists, wherever they happen to come from. Just wanted to say that. And I also noticed that Teresa Brady had a question, and I think she kind of gave up on us calling on her. So maybe she wants to ask her question.
We have so many questions in the chat, so it's sort of hard to, to navigate it all and try to get to everybody. So, is Teresa still here?
I think so.
Teresa, if you're still here, show yourself.
I think she wrote that she had to go.
Oh, okay.
Or did she? Okay. Sorry, Jennifer. Just continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So to the point of talking to people, one commenter it says State Senator Josh Becker has championed some meaningful climate action. Perhaps you could make this presentation to his office and see if anything can be done in the legislature to stop this form of dirty energy generation.
Yeah, no, I've definitely been in touch with Senator Becker's office before, and I think that kind of legislative outreach is worth pursuing. I'm a little bit. I don't know that there's a legislative fix to this, but I definitely know that we need to be attentive to what's going on in the legislature, because it's more likely that there'd be legislation that is passed that helps facilitate projects like this. That's what we've been seeing the legislature doing. But that legislative engagement is definitely part of our slate of work for 2024. And again, that's where, there's dozens of people here in this forum who have a lot of experience. And I did notice there was one question about some decent, concise talking points. I can follow up with Karen to make sure those kinds of resources are available, because I believe that everyone here in this meeting is a perfect ambassador of our work to stop this race to the bottom, as it were, when it comes to California's forests. There's a lot of different things that could happen. Some of them are worse than others, but there's no question that this is like, the worst. These, to make California a wood pellet export, powerhouse is a step in the wrong direction. So, letting our legislators know is a great idea, and everyone here has that competency. So I'm really excited to think about everyone being able to, when the opportunity arises, making sure that decision makers know that this project needs to be stopped.
Well, Josh Becker is represents Karen and myself, probably some other people who are here today. It occurs to me, because we've spoken to Senator Becker before about various issues, home hardening, excessive fuel thinning, with your permission, could we use some of your slides if we were to snag a meeting with him in the coming days?
Certainly. Yeah, it's all so we'll have the slideshow. I sent a PDF over to Karen. I will follow up with Karen very soon, if not tonight, tomorrow, with some examples of kind of cheat sheets for talking points and such. And maybe even make sure that people have some of the comment letters that have been submitted. So just so you know, it's just a question of having a couple of resources to draw from. And then to remember always adding people's individual, spark or charm to it. It's always great to take talking points that we're all using and just to adapt them enough so they sound authentic for the person who's presenting them.
Okay, great. So I just want to note that we are at time. So we do have a lot of questions are coming in fast and furiously now. So what's your hard stop, Gary?
Well, I'm kind of following your lead on this. I'm still available.
Okay. Karen, you want to set a time limit?
What about 5:15? Does that sound good to people?
People want to
Yeah,
stay that long.
I think we have most of the people who originally showed up. And we understand if you have other things to get to, but this is an important discussion we're having. So thank you, Gary, for being generous with your time. So Larry Hansen asks, or comments, the increase of catastrophic wildfires, another issue to bring to the public that wasn't mentioned. This is a byproduct with unintended consequences by reducing mature trees, increasing sun drying effects, reducing moisture levels, and opening areas to wind. Do you have any comment on that? Those thoughts?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, we're trying to again keep some real handrails on how we are advocating against Golden State Natural Resources. And so the proponents of Golden State Natural Resources are leaning really heavily on this idea that there's some sort of secret potion about, raking the forests that will make them suddenly fireproof. And so they tend to spend a lot of their time and a lot of their rhetorical energy on this idea that they're going to meticulously take care of the forest and, not cut any trees and only take the twigs and branches out of there. I basically have been trying to stay away from these talks about forest practices because I think then we stop looking at what's the really gross and extreme manufacturing proposal that is at stake right here. That's at hand. And that's like manufacturing 1 million tons of wood pellets a year. And I don't care how much someone talks about how they're going to be so careful and only use the slash piles to make these wood pellets. If you're making 1 million tons of wood pellets a year, it's going to require like wholesale logging of our forests to get there. So I understand the need and the imperative. As someone who had really strong Humboldt County roots, I know that there's a dilemma in dealing with material when you do something like defensible space or a shaded fuel break. And I know that there's a lot of dilemmas that we need to have transparent, open discussions about in our communities when it comes to community wildfire planning and protection. But I have been trying to avoid that conversation again when I'm talking about Golden State Natural Resources, because what they propose to do here is just way on beyond the discussion our communities need to have about our landscapes. So I hope that's not too elusive, but that's kind of a political decision too.
Yeah. Well, I asked the question, and I just think it's another opportunity to reach the public, because the narrative is that what is being done with vegetative management is to reduce catastrophic fire when it can have the unintended consequences of increasing the catastrophic fire. And I think that that's something that public should be aware of. And I mean, I think that the industry, because of the logging itself, has been a factor in increasing the catastrophic fire. I think that the industry itself has taken the position that, well, they're just going to go in and use more logging because that to say that they're going to reduce fire, when in fact this is not what is happening on the. You look at the fire maps, you look at the studies to show that this is not what's going on in the landscape. So that's very, very dangerous. It's when the California fires is one of the worst impending catastrophes to hit California, and I think it should be addressed directly.
Nice.
The vegetative management is something that is really acting counter. I'm talking about in the wilds, not defensible space. But
Yeah,
Larry, could you wrap up your just in fairness to all the people entered questions in the chat and getting to as many as possible in the time given to us? I just ask everybody to keep their comments and questions concise.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really sensible, Larry. Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great contribution.
Okay, and we do have a raised hand from David Perk.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to give a little bit of context to something in the chat that Karen, the P&W meeting link, and that's in relation to a draft. I believe, I'm not affiliated with that particular meeting, but it sure sounds like that is about the Drax proposed export facility in Longview, Washington. That's a town on the a port town on the Columbia River. It's a 500,000 ton per year export proposal. And Gary, I'll just flag that there's another small town in Washington called Hoquiam, HOQ, and there's a proposal there for another 500,000 ton from a fly-by-night group calling themselves Pacific Northwest Renewable Energy. They got a couple $100,000 from State Department of Commerce. So
yeah, well, thank you, David. I was not aware of the proposal in Hoquiam, but I am aware of the proposal in Longview, and we have a colleague who has been working on that. I haven't been of assistance to him yet, but I will ask him about this situation in Hoquiam, because then we have Washington State right there with two projects, bouncing up to that 1 million tons a year number. I guess, to put it into perspective, in 2011, the United States produced less than 1 million tons of wood pellets a year. And now I think the United States is up over 9 million tons of wood pellets a year. So if the two projects in Washington State or the two projects in California were to come online, either one of the states would be boosting annual wood pellet production by 10%. I mean, it's a lot. So David, really, thank you very much for bringing that up. And I think tactically, it's really important to not fall into some sort of California exceptionalism and miss what's happening in other jurisdictions like Washington State.
Yeah. Thanks for your work.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
So there have been a lot of comments about the issues in Washington. Do we take it then by the response you just gave that Biofuelwatch is working with Washington groups as well?
We don't have the capacity yet. You could take it that we're aware that this stuff is happening, and I'm interested and concerned, but I would have to admit to being like pretty much out of the loop on the specifics of what's happening in Washington State on this. But that, that may change. Especially I hear people's urgency about this.
Okay, and where are tribes on biomass and forest biomass?
Well, that's a complicated question. I'm not really the expert, and I certainly can't speak for any tribal interests. I think it's, again, there's a dilemma for a lot of land managers. So it is, it remains to be seen. I'm sure different tribal interests have totally different stances on it right now. But we're really attentive, for instance, in particular, what the Pitt River tribe may either be in support of or in opposition to Golden State Natural Resources.
Okay, and just for the sake of everybody here, Karen is going to save the chat. So it will be available. There's lots of good comments and links in the chat. So for follow-up purposes, just to let you know that. Okay, so I'm gonna this is a comment really more than a question, but just see if anybody in this group can respond to this directly. So even here in the Tahoe Basin, there is growing talk of biomass. With the soon to open sawmill in Carson City, we imagine the momentum will grow. I heard talk of GSNR proposing up to 14 sites across the state if this initiative goes, or if this initially goes well. Would love to connect with anybody interested in organizing efforts. Definitely a concern for our local group. And Gary did give a response to that question. But does anybody else in this group have anything that they can offer in that regard, in response to this comment? Okay, just want to be sure. So how will Biofuelwatch be responding to DEIR?
Well, we're definitely going to be attentive for the release of the DEIR. And, I don't imagine that there's going to be a really big change strategically in how we respond. Biofuelwatch is just one of a whole handful of really powerful and capable organizations. NRDC, Center for Biological Diversity, Partnership for Policy Integrity, Biofuelwatch. There are so many groups that have been involved, and I'm not going to successfully remember them all right now, but I think we will be trying kind of to repeat a two-tier approach. I think we'll be supporting attorneys that are going to be really prepared to provide very, very technical responses to the questions raised in the DEIR, and then we will organize in a more mass fashion as we did previously in trying to create comment letter and talking points in order that we can get as many groups as possible to sign on. I'm sure there'll be some other organizing opportunities that will come out of the release of the DEIR. And this is where, once again, the more the merrier. And the more people try to get the word out, the more people try to initiate activities on their own, the more momentum we build as a coalition. And again, when we think about the depth of the discussion here today, even though I'm speaking tactically and politically about how I'm trying to focus just on Golden State Natural Resources on this campaign right here, we know that this is an opportunity to create a whole new level of interest in protecting California's forests and understanding the intricacies of the politics surrounding California's forests right now. So organizing really hard around the DEIR for GSNR is just another opportunity to really to get in front of people to talk about our forests. And it's a delicate time politically. We know it's going to take all of our energy to protect our communities in these landscapes we love. So we're going to lean into the DEIR, but I just love having been in a meeting here with dozens of people who know how to rattle the cages of decision makers too. So I think we'll all have a little bit of fun when that finally hits the streets.
Well, let's hope it is a lot of fun. Let's hope it's not a little fun, but a lot of fun. So I'm just going to ask you one last question that came in through the chat, and I want to be sure to give Karen 30 seconds to talk about our next month's presenter before we wrap it up. So will burning wood pellets be less expensive to consumers than coal for the equivalent amount of energy?
Well, coal has a lot of externalities there that don't get counted. So there's a lot of expense to burning coal. So biomass, the same thing. But our impression really is that biomass has generally been more expensive than coal. And if it weren't for the exceptional public subsidies that have been available to make biomass economically viable, we don't think it would be the threat that it has become. So again, in the chat, there's a little bit of discussion about the carbon emissions loophole. So how biomass is given a free pass for the emissions from the stack. You know, they don't officially count, even though they're going into the atmosphere anyhow. And the idea of characterizing biomass as renewable. These are kind of larger issues that we need to all keep pushing back against to have some success on these matters.
Okay, and I think we're going to wrap it up with that last question. And I got to say, Carrie, you are an amazing multitasker. I'm seeing how you are answering questions in the chat. Oh my goodness, your fingers can really work. So I think we can all agree that this was a fascinating hour and 15 minutes, and we thank you so much, Gary, for being with us here this evening. And yeah, watch for the recording, where you can look at the chat and look at some of the discussion that went on in the chat if you didn't catch it this time around. So. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Karen, so you can just say a word about next month, January. It'll be the third Monday in January.
Or the fourth.
Or the fourth. Okay.
Because of Martin Luther King. So let me just say a couple of words before I go on. I talk about that. So Gary, thanks again for coming. And I hope you will kind of keep us abreast of what you do, because the Stop Clearcutting with regard to this GSNRA, because Stop Clearcutting campaign has letter writers, a group of letter writers. We also have a group that posts on Facebook and Instagram. So maybe we can help get your message out if you let us know, exactly, what you would like us to do.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely do that.
Our website, Stop Clearcutting, is a wealth of information. So I'm always happy to update it with anything from Biofuelwatch that may be pertinent to kind of the issues we're trying to address.
If you see any letters to the editor that need it being answered, Jennifer is in charge of that. And so we can try to encourage people to write letters. So anyways, I just wanted to let you know that. And our speaker next month, which will be on the 22nd, the fourth Monday, because of Martin Luther King Day, we don't want to put it in the middle of a holiday weekend. It's going to be Chad Hansen. He's going to be talking about the natural regeneration that's already happening at Sequoia National Park and Monument, that the federal government is thinking of. They want to go in there and cut down a lot of dead and dying sequoias and plant seedlings, whereas this is already coming up naturally without them doing that. And there's a law that the former speaker, Kevin McCarthy, put out, which is Save Our Sequoias, which Sierra Club is trying to stop. And this campaign, the Stop Clearcutting California campaign, is also actively involved in trying to stop that law. So next month, we'll hear more about what's happening naturally and about the law and how you can participate. So I hope a lot of you will come next month. And I will be sending out probably in a couple of days a link to this recording and the chat, and also get the talking points that Gary was going to provide me. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Be safe out there,